everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little black subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that black subscribe button. Really does help our audience grow, really does help our channel grow, really does help and mean more than you could possibly know. So go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Also, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet 50 on any game, get $250 in free bets. Thank you again to Betfred. Thank you again to you. Now, here is the video that you came here for. It is obviously Final Four weekend, but while there are 4 teams still competing for a national championship, for everybody else at college basketball, you know what the focus of your attention on is right now, and that is the transfer portal. Over the last couple of days, we've done a lot of transfer portal stuff here on the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube. We've done 2 or 3 kind of updates on who's in, who's committing, who's visiting where. But what I want to do today is focus on one specific player, because on Monday, we had a guy that I would argue is the most high-profile player that has ever entered the transfer portal when we got a shocker on Monday. Maybe a shocker, maybe not a shocker. We'll discuss that in a minute. But Caleb Love, NCAA tournament hero for North Carolina, is gone out in the transfer portal. And so over the last 24 hours, I've had about 1 million people ask me, Aaron, where do you think Caleb Love is going to end up? And so I want to discuss all of that right now. I've whittled it down to about 4 or 5 schools that I think make a lot of sense for him. But before I get into it, let me say this. Caleb Love is maybe not only the most high-profile player to enter the transfer portal, but I would also argue maybe the most polarizing player as well. Because on the one hand, there is the positive, right? And the positive is we have all seen Caleb Love on the biggest stages of the NCAA tournament elevate not only himself, but an entire team in March. 30 points in the Sweet 16 last year against UCLA, 28 in the Final Four against Duke, basically the dagger in Coach K's side that ended his career. But for people who don't follow North Carolina very much or on a day-to-day basis, he was also kind of the problem this year. Finished the year shooting about 37% from the field this year, 29% from beyond the three-point line. So this is a guy that has been a March hero that elevated North Carolina, that led them to a national championship. But he's also a guy that had a down year this year, was not a great teammate, at least on the court, and was essentially forced out of the program by North Carolina. If you read reports on Monday when he entered the portal, it was very clearly a mutual decision. He thought it was time to move on, and it didn't feel like anybody at Carolina really stopped him. And so because of it, I think it sets up for a fascinating portal recruitment, because I'm not sure, because if it was based solely on talent, I think everybody would be bought in. But it's not solely based on talent, and I can see some schools just saying, I'm good, I'm chilling, we got our guys over here. And so what I want to do now is kind of go through the schools that I think make the most sense. And then from there, I'll add a little bit of a caveat as well, saying that I think you need a program that both has a certain style of play, but also has a certain style of head coach that isn't going to put up with nonsense. And I'm not blaming Hubert Davis, but basically somebody that's going to look Caleb Love in the eye and say, this is how we do things. We've been here before without you. We will be great without you if you do not want to come here. And so are you bought into what we want to do? Because I do think there are some schools that are just going to say, you know what, he's very talented, but he's not worth the time. So when I heard Caleb Love enter the transfer portal, 2-3 schools came to mind. Let's get into it. I put together about a top 5, but let's get into it. And the first school that immediately came to mind might be one that's actually a little bit surprising. So the first school that jumped out to mind to me was the Missouri Tigers. And I know what some of you are thinking, Torres, go from Carolina, the most highest of high-profile schools, to a very good Missouri program. Dennis Gates is the man. I thought he should have been SEC Coach of the Year. But I think a lot of people would be surprised by that. The reason that I think Missouri makes the most sense is a few reasons. One, for people who don't know, he's from St. Louis. So it's an easy sell. He's going home. He's a little bit of a reclamation project. Maybe he can take Missouri from really good program that just made the second round of the NCAA tournament to an elite Final Four caliber program. I would also say on top of that, I think the system kind of works. And that's kind of what's interesting about Caleb Love too, is that sometimes when a guy decides to transfer, like he's just a talented player, but in the wrong place. Okay. So I'll give you an example. few years ago, Andrew Nemhard is at Florida. He enters the portal, and I say, dude, come on, man. Maybe you should just make it work at Florida. Like, part of the problem that you struggled was on you. Then I saw he was going to Gonzaga, and I said, you know what? That's actually a much better fit for him. And so that's the interesting part with Caleb Love. He was kind of in the right place from a style perspective, but he's certainly got to go to a place that wants to push the ball, that wants to space the floor. And that's clearly what Dennis Gates did this year. 79 points per game scored, one of the top 20 highest scoring offenses in college basketball. And finally, what I would say about Gates is, I think he's the right kind of coach for Caleb Love. Because while Dennis Gates is a man of few words, he doesn't say a lot, at least, not in front of the cameras, not during games. Anyone who's ever played for him, anybody who's ever been around him knows that he is a man of discipline, a man of accountability. And I think he's kind of that guy that can keep Caleb Love in line, where if Caleb Love has 2-3 bad possessions, he'll pull him out and say, you come sit on the bench next to me here for a few minutes. So because of the state ties, I would assume NIL would be great for a Missouri kid representing the University of Missouri on top of style play and coaching staff. I think Missouri probably makes the most sense. Let's get to another one that makes a little bit of sense. Now, some of it will, some of it won't. And I think that's the University of Alabama. And listen, we can argue about what Nate Oates, the school, how they handle the whole Brandon Miller situation. But on the court, I think we have to acknowledge this looks like a really fun place to play, a really fun style of play to play. And the thing about Alabama is not only does the style fit Caleb Love perfectly, but it's worth noting they're going to need guys next year, okay? So Brandon Miller is declaring for the draft. That goes without saying. But the rest of the backcourt is kind of in flux. So yesterday I did a portal kind of recap, if you will. And I think I mentioned that Mark Sears was out of eligibility. That was wrong. So Mark Sears will be back. But just about everybody else is up in the air. Javon Quinterly actually has a 6th year of eligibility. If he wants it, it's up in the air. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? He's got some good NIL opportunities. But on, Tuesday, Namari Burnett, backup guard, decided to transfer. Dom Welsh, a veteran, is out of eligibility. And Jaden Bradley was a 5-star guard that I would suspect is probably going to be back, but I don't think it's a certainty, and it wouldn't shock me if he decides to test the NBA draft waters. And so because of it, even if everything goes their way, even if Quinterly comes back, even if Bradley comes back, I still get the sense that they're going to be looking for a guard or two in the portal. Well, Caleb Love, he's got talent. He's great in the open floor. And I think he would thrive for Nate Oates offensively. Now, the question is he going to buy into what Nate Oates and that team does all across the court? Because the thing about Alabama, and again, you can criticize Alabama off the court, how they handle things, but they're a very disciplined team on the court. Not a lot of bad shot selection. And then on top of that, and don't give me they missed a bunch of threes in the NCAA tournament. That's how their offense works. But they're also very disciplined on the defensive end. I don't think people realize they were a top 20 team in basically every defensive category that mattered this year. And so that's my question. Is Caleb Love going to be fully bought in on both ends of the court? Is he going to do what he has to do? Could he get a little too shot happy? But Alabama is a place that in my mind makes a lot of sense. Let's keep it going, because there is another school. Somebody sent me a text earlier today that I hadn't thought of this one, but I do think it makes sense. That's the Memphis Tigers. So Memphis is a very interesting spot because remember, over the last 2-3 years, Penny Hardaway, first of all, Penny Hardaway, you can criticize him for whatever you want, but all these NBA guys that come to college, Patrick Ewing and Chris Mullen and whoever, Penny Hardaway actually likes to recruit. Penny Hardaway is actually a very good recruiter. And the one thing that he sold over the last couple off seasons is, I'm an NBA point guard. Let me coach you. Let me teach you. 2 years ago with Amani Bates, it did not work out. But this past year with Kendrick Davis, a 5th-year graduate transfer, it was perfect. And Kendrick Davis was a superstar that if he doesn't get hurt in the NCAA tournament, Memphis probably beats Florida Atlantic in round 1. And who knows if we're talking about Memphis going to the Final Four. And so Memphis is graduating a bunch of players off this year's team. They have a big high school recruiting class, which, Penny hasn't had a ton of success with the high school players. He's done a very good job with the older groups this year being specific to that. So I'll be curious to see if Penny Hardaway gets in the mix and says, listen, I'm a former NBA guard. I know what it takes to get you there. You want to be one and done, if you will, at Memphis. Come to Memphis, be part of what we're doing. That's number 3. Number 4 is another school that popped to mind, and it's kind of an interesting, let me explain why. That's the Louisville Cardinals. And on the one hand, the reason Louisville popped into mind is a few reasons. One, it's important to note, when he committed to North Carolina, he actually chose North Carolina over Louisville. Now, where it's different is that entire coaching staff that recruited him is gone. He was recruited by the Chris Mack staff. I believe he was actually recruited by Luke Murray, who's now at UConn. No, UConn is not in the mix. Don't even ask me about that. Or at least I don't think they will be. But that staff is gone at Louisville, so there's no natural ties. But he's obviously comfortable with the school. And what I would say is, like, this is the kind of splash player that if it clicks for Kenny Payne, like, you can go from being the worst team in major college basketball, basically the Power 6 conferences, to like, oh, they're actually pretty good this year. And I think that's what Louisville is missing so far. So Louisville has had a very good spring. They quietly added Sky Clark, former 5-star guard. They added Dennis Evans, a project center, 7'1" guy out of California. They added Trenton Flowers, a 5-star guy. I almost called him Trenton Waterford, which I think I'm thinking of Trendon Waterford from LSU. Neither here nor there. Trenton Flowers, okay? But he's a 5-star reclass guy. And I don't think they have that like one dude that they can just give the ball to and take over games. And so while Sky Clark is good and these other guys are good, Caleb Love would elevate them to an entirely different level. So again, I understand that the staff that recruited Caleb Love to Louisville is no longer there, but that's one where it actually makes sense on both sides from my perspective. And then let's be honest, from Caleb Love's perspective, he's probably like, dude, I can get as many shots as I want. I can go wild over there. NBA arena, NIL opportunities. That's a fourth one that makes sense. And finally, a fifth one. And this is one that I don't think there's any real natural ties that I know of, but it is one that makes sense to me. And that's the Gonzaga Bulldogs. And one, it's style of play. They want to get up and down. They want to score. It's a guard-oriented offense, whether it's Jalen Suggs, Corey Kispert, Andrew Nemhard, whoever, Nolan Hickman, etc. But two, they're also kind of a team that needs dudes. And we talked about this on Monday's Aaron Torres pod. Listen, every time you criticize Gonzaga, there's going to be the people that say you hate Gonzaga or they love you because they don't believe in Gonzaga themselves. But when I look at Gonzaga next year, I can tell you straight up, if Drew Timme doesn't use his extra year of eligibility, and he has said publicly he is not planning on it, look at that roster. There really isn't that much there, especially if Julian Strawther, a third-year junior, decides to go pro. Julian Strawther is probably the only NBA player on that roster right now. So if he goes pro and Timme leaves, talking about Nolan Hickman, Hunter Salas, Efton Reed, Malachi Smith, there isn't that one guy that you need to maintain that Gonzaga standard of competing at the highest level. And so I don't know if these guards are good enough. It's worth noting that last year, Gonzaga aggressively pursued guards in the portal. They were a finalist for Tyrese Hunter. They were a finalist for Kevin McCullough. So I think even Mark Few kind of knew coming into this year, he wasn't sold that his guards were good enough. So I wouldn't be surprised if they made a call. Now, the one thing that's worth noting, Mark Few, Roy Williams are really close. And I'm sure he would get on the phone with Roy Williams to see if it was worth the phone call. But if it's just about style of play and fit and elevating yourself, I actually think Gonzaga would be a perfectly good fit. A couple other places I've had a lot of people reach out to me about. I want to just hit on them really quick. A lot of Kentucky fans have asked me, hey, what about Kentucky? There's, I guess, starting to be some buzz that maybe one of their 5-star freshmen, Rob Dillingham, there's something going on. What if he doesn't come? What if this happens? What if that happens? One, I haven't heard anything that Rob Dillingham isn't coming. But then two, on top of that, I just don't know. I mean, you have DJ Wagner. You're probably going to have Dillingham. Antonio Reeves, I think, will be back. That's a lot of mouths to feed, let alone Justin Edwards, Aaron Bradshaw, etc. My guess would be no on that. My guess would also be no on Kansas. I saw a lot of Kansas fans like, what about us? I don't know. What about you? You got a great point guard, DeJuan Harris. Got a great backup point guard in Joseph Yesufu. Don't think Kansas makes a ton of sense for him. And I've seen a little bit of buzz on Arkansas. I don't see it. I mean, I think Muss will make the call, but I also think Muss and him might butt heads. Caleb Love's a very strong-willed player. Again, I don't know how committed he is on the defensive end. Don't really see Caleb Love at Arkansas, but you never know. But if I had to power rank it, I think the 5 schools, like I said, they make the most sense are Missouri, Alabama, Memphis, Louisville, and Gonzaga. And we'll see if somebody else gets involved. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. Also, make sure you're listening to new episodes of the Aaron Torres Podcast 3 times a week, wherever you get podcasts.